the Healing Spring Show, healing families and communities by breaking the stigma of addiction and expanding the scope of recovery. Now here's your host, John Edmondson.
Today we have a story that demonstrates how we can show courage in the time of a crisis, even a national one. But it's also a story for all of us to hear how we can show courage with our own personal crisis. Today we have a very special and important guest for you, Samantha Horwitz. She's former Secret Service agent, first responder, and was there at 9/11 when the planes hit. Samantha, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
So talk to us a little bit about this. You have a book out. It's called The Silent Fall, and it goes through your experience both at 9/11 and also afterwards, what happened. Tell us a little bit about, maybe we start with you first, who you are, some of your story, and then we'll dive into what happened.
Yeah, well, it was a kind introduction. I am a 9/11 first responder, former U.S. Secret Service agent. Just happened to be going to work that day. It was any given Tuesday, and an accident that I got stuck in it changed my life forever, for the better. Actually, a lot of people think going through tragedy and hard times and always maybe feeling like, wow, why can't I catch a break, is a bad thing. And I'd like people to know that, it's really a good thing, because you can use that to not only help yourself and drive yourself forward, but also help others. And that's what I've been doing since I got well. Trying to do the timeline in my head right now, about 2004, after treatment. And since that time, another stint in law enforcement. I have a heart for service. And now it's all about post-traumatic stress education, sharing my story, really sending the message that it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to stay there. And allowing people to grab onto pieces of my story if they can relate, and allowing my lessons that I put in the book, because I think it's important to talk about traditional therapies. Of course, it saved my life, but also to go a step forward. In my case, I learned a lot off the couch, if you will, and so I put it in the book and just hope that people find it healing for them and can use it.
Oh, and I bet they can. The first statement you said was one of the most powerful I've heard in a long time. It's okay to not be okay, but you don't want to stay there. It's not okay to stay there. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you brought a picture with us today to take a look at, and maybe we can get that on the screen and look. It talks a little bit about what happened that day. So maybe we'll start some with the story, what led up to this moment, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened afterwards.
Sure. Like I said, I was just going to work, and when I finally made my way through that accident scene that delayed me, I was in Tower 1's elevator. I used to take the elevator up to the plaza level, walk across the plaza level to World Trade Center 7, which is where I went to work every day. That was the New York field office for the Secret Service. And while I was in the elevator going up, the elevator car started shaking, the lights started flickering, and myself, along with everybody else in there, thought this was just a simple, we're now getting stuck in an elevator.
Right.
So I'm looking at my watch going, wow, I'm really going to be late, and I don't know how I'm going to live this down, because in law enforcement, if you're on time, you're late. And all of a sudden, it was as if a hand grabbed the top of the elevator car and just started yanking us up really fast. And we stopped very abruptly, and we stopped so fast that when the doors flew open, we're still bouncing under the tension of the wires. Wow. And went to step out, and the debris field was already in that lobby level of Tower 1. Didn't know that some 94 stories above, American Airlines Flight 11 had struck the World Trade Center. So we were very lucky to be able to get out.
But you said something interesting, though, that I just caught it. You were in traffic before you got there, and that traffic actually was a blessing.
Well, it put me...
That's a way of saying it.
Yeah, it put me in that elevator.
At that time.
And I believe it was a blessing because, unless you're trained as a first responder, you watch people do very interesting things in the midst of a crisis. And I watch people literally turn in circles. A gentleman that was on the elevator with me get off the elevator and try and go to the second elevator to go
just
back
like walk
down.
Around and start hitting the button?
Yeah. So
Wow.
what's the first thing we learn as a kid, or if you're in any office building? In case of fire, use
the
stairs.
stairs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get back on the elevator. And so I was right there to be able to pull people out of the elevator and lead them to safety. So that's why I say it was a blessing to be able to do what I was trained
Do
to
what
do.
you do. It puts you in the right place at the
Yeah.
right time to be of service. I want to ask, and a lot of people may be thinking this, what was going through, if anything, your mind at that moment? The doors open up, you're kind of bouncing, you look out, you see someone walking in a circle, another guy's walking around, gentleman, hitting the button. Were there any thoughts, or was it just...
I was very calm. A voice inside my head said, "There's an explosion, get out." Again, it's the training that we receive, the months and years, and it's training that never stops. You keep practicing. I like to say we practice like we play. So while we weren't serving the president or a foreign dignitary or working a case, we had quarterly training. So we were practicing, building entries, responding to crisis events, that kind of thing. Nothing on the lines of 9/11, but that training, when it's part of you, it's part of your brain, and it's just crisis, calm. And that's what I was able to do and stay calm the whole day.
All the way through it.
It's kind of weird for people to hear, and it's like, well, how did you stay so calm? It just, when you're trained to do it that way,
It just becomes a habit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A habit that is good, that saved my own life and others.
And it's an important thing, too. A lot of times as therapists, we talk about how important it is to connect to your feelings. But then the reality is, if you're a Secret Service or you're a first responder, there's a moment you don't need to connect to your feelings. You really need to shut that down. Otherwise, you're not going to make it through. You'd be the person walking in circles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that fear takes over.
Yeah, so there are those healthy moments not to feel fear. There's healthy moments not to be engaged in that.
Yeah, I just wish, I could have turned that off.
You got to flip
and
that
come
switch.
flip that switch and come back into the understanding what I was going through and connecting with feeling versus a lot of my family said it was very like sometimes nobody was home afterwards.
So I was going to ask about that. You made it through this moment, and in this picture up here, can you tell me what was the event going on here? What was this
Sure.
moment?
So after we eventually evacuated our building, Building 7, so Tower 2 had been struck, and we're thinking, well, we're the third tallest building in the World Trade Center complex. We're next. So we're thinking coordinated bombing attack at this point because the Secret Service field office was in 7. Then Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management was in that building, and some other unnamed, I'll just say offices
Right.
that people didn't know about. And it made sense that, we couldn't see that they were planes. At this moment, we knew that there were planes that had hit the towers. We happened to run into a school after Tower 2 came down. And in this picture, myself and 2 fellow agents were actually carrying one of the students who became, I'll say, paralyzed by fear. And as Tower 1 started coming down, we had no choice but to scoop him up and start running up West Side Highway. So that is a picture. You can see his foot right there. And as we're going up West Side Highway and that dust cloud that the news and all the other agencies have made famous, everybody, that just, it is exactly as it appears no matter what 9/11 special you watch. The dust just is like rolling up West Side Highway, and we make it so that it doesn't engulf us. And we stop, and these 2 gentlemen, firefighter EMTs, jump out of the back of an ambulance that seemed to appear out of nowhere. And we get the student off to the hospital. We put him on a stretcher, and that's it. We're left standing on the side of West Side Highway thinking, now what? And our pagers go off. And we have scrolling text on the pager. All NYFO agents report to Pier 63. So we walked a couple blocks. We had already walked, way, way further than you would on any given day in New York City. Yeah, we make it to Pier 63, and our supervisors arrange with the U.S. Park Police A lot of people don't know that the Secret Service is actually one of the smallest federal agencies in existence. So in order to do our jobs, we relied on other agencies. The U.S. Park Police, since we're in New York, a lot of foreign dignitaries wanted to go to the Statue of Liberty and other park where their jurisdiction was in play. So we knew those guys, and we got ferried across the Hudson River to New Jersey. And the agents from our New Jersey field office were waiting for us and took us all home.
So you're
Very
good there.
surreal.
Very surreal. Even listening to you talk about it sounds surreal. It makes it very real sitting here with you and seeing this and hearing the story. And I'm always careful with the word hero because many people who have been in that position either like or don't like or are cautious about that word, but it was very heroic what you did. And helping them. And again, I want to just publicly thank you for your service on that. That's powerful.
Well, you're welcome. And that's a word that it took me a long time to accept and just be gracious with it. Understand that people that are not in service or not first responders, that's how they see it from the outside. Mm-hmm. When we're living it, we're in it every day. We protect and serve and carry out other missions. It's not part of our vernacular, if you will.
Right.
And so it sounds like, who are
Who
you talking about?
Yeah.
I look over my shoulder. Oh, me? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have this power, of course, and you had this powerful event and experience, and you were on point, and you managed it so well. But then you said something very interesting, is you couldn't necessarily turn it off. So now you're being ferried out, you're going home. And for a lot of people, they just think, oh, now it's over. Mm-hmm. But it's really not. What was it like for you?
You said it perfectly. It's not. It's actually, that was the beginning. When I'm pulling away from the dock and I'm looking at a skyline that's forever changed, the two towers, you turn on any movie, and the two towers were in that movie. It took place in New York.
Right.
And now, they show the Freedom Tower, which is the new Tower 1. And all the events of what I had been through started replaying in my head. Not like a movie reel in front of me, just I was able to recall like flashes. Mm-hmm. And I got back to my apartment, and it's like you said, okay, I'm safe. I'm out of harm's way. Everything should be fine, right? So I go into my bathroom, which... Normal
place,
yeah,
right?
Normal thing, normal place, my apartment. I want to get out of the clothes that I'm still wearing, with the dust and everything. And I close the door to my bathroom, and I start sweating. My heart starts racing. I'm like, what is this? I open the door. It dissipates. I kind of shrug it off. I'm like, oh, I just been through something.
Yeah, so it's okay.
So, yeah.
Just a moment.
So, but that kept happening. And I just kept putting it at the back of my mind. And then the symptoms of what I found out come with post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. More than a year later, that was cascaded one after the other. The nightmares, very, very vivid that night. Any loud noise produced a startle reflex, hypervigilance. And so I'm thinking, what is all this? And how do I manage myself as a professional? Because there is a different level. People think Secret Service, you're with the president. Yes, that's true. So it's...
You have to have that persona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is dark suit, sunglasses, and it was so easy to hide behind those glasses. I mean, you could, we had our sunglasses. If the sun was shining, we got the sun.
Have it on, yeah.
And... I'll say even if the sun wasn't shining, we had them on. And so I could mask what was going on. And then one day, which I normally didn't drink a lot, especially because of the nature of my duties, I had to be on. I decided, well, I'm just going to have a beer. And I noticed that it took the edge off. So I'm like, okay, well, if one will do that, yeah, I know, I'm a lightweight. What will two? Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, this is good. Two took...
Something good's happening here.
Yep. And then I switched to wine, not in the same night, because that would be a total disaster. And that seemed to do it more effectively. So I started drinking every day to mask and to calm my system. And it's something that I used because it was legal, not healthy. Let's put, please don't do this. I talk about this in my book. But it allowed me to function in a way where I didn't have to feel, where I didn't have to experience the stress responses to a point. Mm-hmm. So I could kind of numb out. And as the days, weeks, months, years passed, I know it wasn't just me that used alcohol, and I know now that what we're dealing with, the crisis with first responders and suicide epidemic, it's still the most prevalent form of self-medication. And I think in my mind, I rationalize it, and people think it's okay because you turn on any television show, any movie, if it's dealing with cops, hey, you've had a rough day,
right?
What do? You go to the bar.
Yeah, have a beer, have a drink.
So it's in our culture. It's part of our culture. Again, we have to realize that that's not an okay thing to do, that the best thing to do is find the courage to ask for help. And that's not always an easy thing to do either. In my case, I asked for help twice, wasn't rejected, but was told that the folks were too busy. So we had a field office that where we functioned, but barely, if you will.
Wow. So and I have a question too. You talked about post-traumatic stress, and I know there is a word out there. There's two different words people use now. There's the PTSD and PTSI, and I know there's a lot of talk about how to use that. Do you have a thought or input on that?
Well, most people still use, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's part of the, when you're getting treatment for insurance, really, because it's in that you have to be. It has to be coded. So there you've got your label, if you will. And what we're trying to do now is to put a message out there that, hey, you are not a disordered human being. That you can come back fully. From a diagnosis of PTSD. And so we're trying to bring in this idea that post-traumatic stress is actually an injury. So the trauma, in my example of 9/11, created an injury, if you will, to my brain, just as if I broke my arm. I got professional help. I got the diagnosis. I went through the therapy. If I broke my arm, I'd go through surgery if necessary. I'd go through rehab. And I would be able to assimilate, function normally in society. You won't find me if there's a thunderstorm now jumping under furniture. That's in my past, what happened before. Those loud noises. And now, I'm just like everybody else. I do have, triggering events every now and then, but I have a skill set, a toolbox, if you will, to draw on that I learned both on the couch and off to manage that. And so I don't consider myself a permanently disordered human being.
Yeah, and that's the part I wanted to highlight a little bit, because when we talk about asking for help, you're very much, again, there's that courage, very much a minority in that. So many people just don't ask.
Yeah, it's the stigma that's attached to it. Oh my God, what are people going to think? Am I going to be removed from, my duties on the street? And I'm not an expert in that. I didn't, go to school. I don't have those letters behind my name. I can tell you, if you have the courage to step forward, go outside your agency. But get the help that you absolutely deserve. You deserve it. Yeah.
So how did you get help? What was it that you did?
Well, it took holding a gun to my head to really wake myself up. Or I had some help from the guy upstairs who sent me two signs, very clear signs. He actually spoke to me once, but I was totally, blitzed on alcohol, and it's a deep, dark place that I didn't want to believe that it was him talking to me. And then, so I tried to pull the trigger again, and this time he sent my dog. And I've always been connected to animals, and my dog jumped into my lap and saved my life because startled me. I'm looking down at this fuzzy face, and I swear it was like he was sending me a message that he needed me to be there. And I really believe, after talking to a lot of people that in different practices, different spiritualities, that he sent my dog, not to be funny, at a church one day, and a lady came up and whispered in my ear, "You know what dog is spelled backwards, Sam?" God. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that is a very clear, vivid memory for me. And Solomon was my dog's name. He's no longer with us, but I have 3 amazing dogs now. I had 2 as I wrote the book, and they know. I have one that's trained as a therapy dog, so he definitely knows when I get stressed and helps me with that.
So this is a big picture that we're painting here. It went from, the time of courage, the time, or just in the zone, as I say, not really feeling anything going through it, to a time of, let me ease it a little bit, have a couple of drinks here and there. The beer was okay, the wine was better. It progressed over a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself sitting there making a choice between living and dying. And you're holding a gun to your head, literally. You said the first message was just like a thought, like maybe I shouldn't do this.
Well, it was actually him speaking to me, he said, "Sam, it's not your time."
And you heard that.
And I heard it. Yeah. And I actually looked around my basement, and I knew nobody was there. But like I said, I was in such a bad place that I just, that couldn't have been real.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are watching this who either had or may find themselves in that bad place. And you're painting a picture of the idea of listening.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not their time to make that choice. And there could be something waiting for them.
I would say don't let it get to that point. If you're having thoughts that maybe life would be better without you on the planet, you need to reach out. I struggled. It's this, again, living the persona of, Sam, she's a Secret Service agent, she's law enforcement, she's the strongest person. Everybody would say, "Oh my gosh, you're the strongest person I know." Little did they know I was operating in such weakness, and didn't know, when I wake up in the morning, which straw to grasp onto, whose hand was going to be the hand that was going to really help me. And my mom, she's a hypnotherapist, and she was actually watching, I'll call it my slow decline, didn't say anything. Nobody knew I hid my suicide attempt from everybody until I wrote this book. Now, to give you a timeline, this book came out on the 15th anniversary of 9/11. So this was going into 2003, right?
So
I know it sounds crazy, but yeah, I hid it for a long time. And my mom just put a piece of paper with a name and a number in my hand one day. She came over unannounced, and she just said, "We need you back." She knew. And that's my journey with EMDR.
So tell us about that. You did EMDR, you did some therapy, you said on and off the couch.
Yeah.
What did it look like? What do we label that? The kind of the rise back to being Sam, or?
Absolutely. First, it got me to understand what post-traumatic stress was. Like, that's what was happening. I could now put a name to it, like, oh, I'm not just this crazy person. Because I thought something had really, my personality, something was completely altered, but I didn't know what to call it. And so I got my clinical diagnosis, started treatment immediately. It was some of the hardest stuff I ever had to go through because, EMDR, you relive, you have to walk through the event. And I had a very skilled practitioner. I was very lucky. I didn't have to shop for somebody who got me, because this person, and I write about her in my book, she had already had experience doing EMDR with Vietnam veterans. So understanding that trauma that they had been through, whether it was one event, two event, whatever it was for them, she could directly relate, even though she didn't wear a badge. She never wore a uniform. And went through every single protocol with the light bar and the paddles that would vibrate in your hand, yep. And I didn't feel the need to medicate myself with alcohol as much. Don't get me wrong, was still, that was still my way to kind of keep the symptoms at bay, but I never allowed it to interfere with my therapy. She was very clear as to how she worked, and so there's no alcohol allowed, and if I did, I had to tell her, that kind of thing, and it got me well. And the stuff off the couch it was like a parallel journey, because the EMDR brought down that hypervigilance. It brought down that massive startle response that I had. And the first thing I found myself able to do was actually be outside and not worry about, a car crash or a dumpster truck. And I could walk, and I'm like, wow, I felt free for the first time. So I started incorporating exercise. Because, when you're in the dumps, who wants to get on an elliptical or go for a run? Yeah, it's not. And actually, that's the best thing that you can do for yourself, is to move. Movement brings down every kind of stress that you're feeling in your body. And it allows you to clear your head. And that's every day. I'd walk longer and longer distances. And I had clearer thoughts. And I didn't need to rely on the alcohol. It was kind of amazing. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I should actually believe that it was him that day speaking to me. And so how does that work in my life? So I talked to some people in the spiritual aspect and felt like, how do I come back to rebuild a whole Sam, if you will? That is able to communicate in a more effective way than just getting very angry, because anger is a big thing. And it just, step by step, I kind of peeled the onion and each layer. And it all started with just taking walks and being outside, being connected to nature.
Small steps leading to the bigger ones.
And I realized, okay, fear. How does fear play into this, and even in the bigger picture? Because let me tell you something. I did not like going in to get therapy. The first time she had me recite what happened that day, her front door to her office, somebody slammed it, and I was like a cat, glued to the ceiling.
Jumping high, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So classic startle response, yeah.
Yeah, encouraged to stand in there and go through it.
Yeah.
So you went through all this experience, and now your mission, if we can talk a little bit about it, is you're trying to help other people, and that's the purpose of your book, and you also have a program you're working on as well.
Yeah, it is all about taking my stuff, the worst part of what I went through, and paying it forward. I can't cure you, like I said, I don't have those letters. You can't sit down with me on a couch, but what you can do is read the book and grab my lessons. Let's say you're sitting in a squad car, and myself and I have two partners. It's called a Badge of Honor. We just launched it at badgeofhonor.com on the web, and a Badge of Honor on Facebook. And it's myself, another 9/11 first responder, former retired NYPD detective, and a current law enforcement officer in the Rowlett, Texas area. And the three of us put on workshops, if you will, and we get into the nitty-gritty of what we went through individually, because it's guaranteed that people in that audience, whether you're a current first responder, retired first responder, a researcher, a supporter, you're experiencing it, you have experienced it or you're watching somebody experience it. All the symptomology is the same. It comes out of the book. It's like, check the, yep, you got PTS, okay? And it doesn't matter if you were a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was World War II veteran, first ship into Guadalcanal, blown up. Found his service record. He had what we would call today post-traumatic stress. They call it battle fatigue.
Right.
And he was treated. Symptoms, exactly the same. It was a little freaky reading
Right.
that. And so we take our experiences, put a face to it so people can see, wow, if these people went through it and they're doing this, well, shoot. Then I'm not going to sit in my squad car and think about, putting my gun to my head. Or if I am, I now have these 3 folks to reach out to, because we always give our personal contact information.
And is there a way people can find you if they want to Google or get online? How would they search you?
Yeah, to search me, you can go to samanthahorwitz.com, and that's the best way. You can actually just write me a message through my website or my email, sam@samanthahorwitz.com.
All right. And do you have a final message you want to give? Anything you want to say to the listeners, especially those who may be going through what you went through?
Yeah, it's what I started with, that it is absolutely okay not to be okay. Let's get that right out in the open. You are a human being. You can't unsee the things that you've seen, but you can't stay there. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to your family, your loved ones. You owe it to your department because you signed up to be the best. So reach out and get help. It doesn't have to be through your department. You can reach out on your own to practitioners. Heck, reach out to me, get you hooked up with some amazing folks that can really help. And if you want to come out and see us live, January 29th, we'll be doing a workshop. It's sponsored by the Rockwall County DA's office. They've noticed that their own investigators are having some issues with what they're investigating for cases. So we'll be out there from 9 to noon, and then we'll be at the Veterans Resource and Outreach Center in Rowlett, the neighboring town, on February 29th. Just happened to work out that day. Same date, yep.
Works out good.
Yeah.
Samantha, it's been a true pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate what you do and all the work that you do to help heal folks like me.
It's your pleasure. So the message for the day is it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And if you thought this was beneficial, if it helped you, if you learned something, please share with anyone you think could benefit from this message. And we'll see you next time.